Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the UC Health Training Center for another episode of Broncos Now. Team reporter and host Sydney Jones here. And coming up on today's episode, we'll hear from Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner and general manager George Paton as they met with the media today to discuss the decision to part ways with head coach Nathaniel Hackett, discuss what they're looking for in a new head coach, and more. All that coming up. A lot has happened here at the Broncos headquarters since Sunday's game, in which the team fell 51-14 to the Rams in Los Angeles. On Monday, Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner announced that the Broncos were parting ways with head coach Nathaniel Hackett and consequently named senior assistant Jerry Rosburg to be the interim head coach for the remainder of the 2022 season. And on Tuesday, the Broncos held a press conference in which both Greg Penner and general manager George Paton thanked Nathaniel Hackett for his efforts, discussed what they're looking for in a new head coach, and more. Take a listen to Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner's opening statement.
On behalf of Rob, Carey, and the ownership group, I want to thank Nathaniel Hackett for his contributions to the Denver Broncos. These decisions are hard. We've all enjoyed the relationship that we've developed with Nathaniel, the time that we've spent together, and getting to know him better as a coach and a person. The competitiveness our team has shown this year, despite the injuries and adversity, is a testament to Nathaniel and his leadership. I believe he will be a successful coach in the future, and we wish him the best. When we purchased this great franchise in August, this was not the season we were expecting, and it has been a season that's disappointing for our fans and what they deserve. Their loyalty and support through these difficult seasons has been incredible. I want to personally apologize to our fans and all of Broncos country. We know that we need to be better, and we will. The Denver Broncos are a proud franchise with a rich history and a winning tradition. As owners, it's incumbent on us to have high expectations, set a high standard, and ensure there is accountability. We talked about that at the beginning of the season. It was true then, and it's true now. It's also important for us to be realistic about where we are and the work that needs to be done. And that starts today with our head coaching search. I will lead a thorough process with input from our other owners and from George, who I have confidence in as our general manager. This will be a crucial offseason for us across our football operations. That's coaching, personnel, and support staff. We've got to get this right. I'd like to close by saying that even though the year is not gone as we had hoped, there are a number of bright spots. Our defense is among the best in the NFL. We have some emerging stars and proven veterans on both sides of the ball, and we're building a competitive foundation for the future. The new head coach we hire will have every resource available to them and the full support of our ownership group to build on our winning and championship tradition here.
And general manager George Paton went on to take responsibility for the results of this season.
Nathaniel's a very good football coach, and he's even a better person, and it just didn't work out here, and that's on me. And as I told the players yesterday, I take full responsibility for where we are as a football team. I brought in the head coach. I brought in most of the players. Those are my decisions, and there's no one to blame but me. And I just want to be clear. This isn't just about the coaching. This isn't just about Nathaniel. This isn't about the entire football operation. This is about the personnel, the players, the staff, everyone involved with our football team. It has to be better across the board. I have to be better. We have a lot of work to do, and as I told the players and our staff yesterday, we're all being evaluated. Our record this year, and especially our performance on Sunday, is not what we're about. Sunday's game was unacceptable. It was embarrassing for everyone associated with this team. We have a lot of it's nowhere close to our standard. And while we've played a number of close games and we've had our share of adversity and injuries, all that matters is winning. No one cares about the excuses, and we're not going to make them. We've selected Jerry Rosburg as our interim head coach for the remaining 2 games. And Jerry We're fortunate Jerry was available week 3 when we brought him along to help us with some game management. And Jerry quickly made his mark with the organization, his leadership, his attention to detail. He has a great pulse of the team. He's quickly grabbed the bull by the horns yesterday when I spoke with Jerry, and he's going to lead us these next 2 games, and I feel really good about Jerry. In closing, I challenged our team to finish the year on a winning note, to build for 2023, and we're going to embrace that challenge in front of us. I look forward to finishing this year strong and doing everything possible for us to find that next great head coach of the Denver Broncos.
Now joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio to dive a little bit deeper into today's press conference is Broncos lead writer Aric DiLalla. Aric, appreciate you joining me on the podcast again today. Busy couple days here at the team headquarters.
It really has been, Sydney, a kind of a whirlwind here over the last 24 to 48 hours.
Yep, it has. We'll get right to it because I know there's a ton to talk about today. Aric, we heard from both Greg Penner and George Paton to open the show today. Aric, just to kind of start off, why do you think maybe now was the right time for them to kind of move on from Nathaniel Hackett?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's worth noting that both of those guys, as we heard, said they have respect for Nathaniel Hackett. He's a good coach. They think he'll be successful in the future. It just was not the right fit here. And I think that whether it was yesterday or a couple weeks down the road, based on the way things have gone here, it's likely they would have arrived at the same decision. In terms of why now, I think you look at some of the things that happened. One, on the field, you have a 37-point loss, which is the largest by this organization since 2010. So we're talking about 12 years there. And there was a lot of off the field, I guess I would call it nonsense too.
Yeah.
Dalton Reisner getting in a skirmish with Brett Rippon. You've got Randy Gregory who gets suspended for a game for throwing a punch after the game, and that's in addition to throwing his helmet, getting a roughing the passer penalty. So I think when you look at those off the field issues as well, that's what stood out to Greg Penner in terms of why now is the right time to make a move. And he said, he didn't go into this weekend thinking that this was going to happen, but once this weekend played out the way it did, and he arrived at that decision, it makes no sense to wait 2 more weeks once you decide what you're going to do. So there's a standard here, and we heard, Nathaniel Hackett said it before he was fired, and we heard George and Greg say it again today. It was unacceptable. It was embarrassing. It was time to make a move.
Yep. Well, as their search for a new head coach starts now, what do you think maybe this process will look like? I know we went through one last year with Nathaniel Hackett, but I know Greg Penner mentioned today that, him along with Rob and Carrie and a lot of the ownership group is going to be involved. He mentioned specifically Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah, I think you want to get smart people in the room, and you want as many of them and as many different opinions as possible. Condoleezza, of course, has served on college football playoff committee before, so she's got experience kind of in this realm. And then you look at, George Paton. He's going to be very involved as well. He's going to be a key piece of this search, even though he's not leading it this time around. We heard George Paton talk about last year and say, well, we probably could have cast a wider net. Well, they did cast a pretty wide net to begin with 10 candidates. They went all over the country to interview these candidates.
Yeah.
I think where you talk about a wider net is maybe the second interview where the Broncos, they only interviewed Nathaniel Hackett twice. They did not go back and do a second interview with anybody else. So maybe a more thorough process with multiple candidates.
Right.
I'm assuming that, they're already starting to do their research on potential candidates and will have a good idea of what direction they want to head in. But in terms of a process, I would, again, expect it to be thorough. And I do think it's a good thing that there's ownership involvement. This is a big decision. Certainly the Broncos have not had success finding coaches recently. This will be the 5th head coach in 8 seasons, 3 back-to-back first-time head coaches that have not worked out.
Yeah.
So, if there was any question whether the Walton Penner family ownership group was going to be invested in this team and involved on a day-to-day basis, well, here's your answer. Greg Penner clearly wants to get this right and is going to be very involved in this search process.
Aric, you mentioned, 3 first-year head coaches back-to-back. I know George Paton said today during the press conference that they're going to keep an open mind, in the search throughout the process, whether that's, a more experienced guy or another first-year head coach like you just mentioned. I know they're hoping to interview defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero, but, given that Broncos just head coaching history, do you think that's kind of the direction they go again, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you tend to see with these hires is that teams do the opposite of whatever they did last time.
Yeah.
So you had Vic Fangio, who is kind of this old school. He had a gruff demeanor, very serious, hard training camp practices. They go in the opposite direction, and Nathaniel Hackett, players coach, energetic, bubbly, has kind of all these new school ideas.
Very different from Fangio.
Very different. I think you might see the Broncos kind of do a similar swing here where and instead of first time, maybe it's more experience, maybe someone who's been in this role before, has maybe an ability to instill a culture of accountability and discipline that maybe was lacking a little bit. But of course, you need to consider these first time head coaches as well, because you could find the next coach that's going to be here for 15, 20 years. I mean, everybody's got to get their start somewhere. There's not necessarily statistics that show a previously fired or previously someone who coached somewhere else is going to do a better job than a first-time head coach. There's not that data that suggests that. But I do think just where this Broncos team is, a veteran quarterback, a lot of young players, they want to kind of get things back on the right track. It would probably make sense, in my opinion, to go with someone who has experience. And what you kind of need, Cindy, in my opinion, is like a John Fox type guy who he comes in after Josh McDaniels is here and he kind of resets things, brings some order, brings some accountability, and you build something. And I think the Broncos should be looking for something similar.
Well, Aric, I know you were able to ask Greg Penner during the press conference kind of the qualities that they're looking for. So what specifically did he say that he's going to be on the lookout for throughout this search process? Yeah,
I mean, I thought it was interesting last year when we talked about this with George Paton. It was, hey, we need someone who's an offensive innovator, someone who's going to get this offense right. And Greg Penner certainly said, hey, an offensive identity is important, but he talked more about CEO type qualities in terms of, a leader, somebody that can inspire, someone that's going to bring discipline and culture and accountability and an identity. And all these, they sound like buzzwords, but they matter for a football team. And I think you see throughout the league, the teams that have a coach that instills those qualities, and those are the successful ones. And the teams that do not have that tend to struggle. And listen, in an NFL season, you're either going to have a lot of success, in which case you've got to find a way to manage that success and not be so week to week, or you're going to struggle and you're going to lose a couple of games. And how do you make sure that doesn't become 4 games in a row, 5 games in a row, where it wrecks your season? I think when you have that CEO type guy, the leader of men, someone who instills discipline and accountability. I mean, I look, Mike Tomlin comes to mind as a guy who he's that perfect example of, no matter what's going on the field, they're always going to be, 8-8 or better when there was a 16-game schedule. And even this year, it's been a rough year for them. It's still possible they have a winning record. And that's culture. That's a standard. And I think the Broncos are looking for somebody that can bring that to Denver.
Definitely. Well, another topic that was discussed was, just Russell Wilson's play this season. He would be the first to say that he hasn't played up to his standard or, this organization's standard. So, as we know, a head coach and a quarterback have to have, they need to be on the same page. They need to have a really great relationship. So how important do you think that will be in this search process?
Yeah, I think very important. And I do think it is important to note that George Paton said that this decision was not made because of Russell Wilson, and the new coach is not solely going to be hired with Russell Wilson in mind. They need better offensive play all around the board. You need better defensive play, or to at least maintain this level of defensive play. You need better special teams. So this decision is going to be made with the whole team in mind. But obviously, it's critical that whoever they select has a good relationship with Russell Wilson. His success, his ability to take a step forward is in a lot of ways going to determine, can the Broncos be successful? George Paton made it very clear that he thinks Russell Wilson is still capable of playing at that level. Greg Penner said the same thing. They've just got to find a way to get him there. And, I think it'll be a big part of this process, finding someone who can help Russ. But it's also, when you look at the other side, it's going to have to be a coach that wants to come in here and work with Russ and get him back to that level. So it kind of goes two ways. The Broncos, I think are in a better position than some teams because they have a guy that he can play like a franchise quarterback.
Right.
Now you got to get him back there, but if you do that, you don't have to worry about searching for a guy. You've got one right here who's proven he can be a big time player. Just got to find a way to get him back to that level.
Yeah. Well, last one for you here, Aric. Greg Penner said they're going to evaluate everyone, moving forward. The team already announced that they relieved special teams coordinator Dwayne Stukes and offensive line coach Butch Berry, from their duties. So they're wasting no time turning things around. They want to turn things around now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Greg Penner said that, he wanted to wait till the end of the season to make a decision, but can be impatient and wants to start fixing things right away. One of the things that really stood out to me and I think may have resonated with fans on Twitter was that, they've reached out to Dr. Alan Sills, the NFL's chief medical officer, to just say, hey, how does our program here, our wellness program, which includes the training staff, the strength and conditioning staff, dietitians, everything, how does that compare to the rest of the league? Because as George Paton said, there's been injury problems in Denver for years now where they're among the more injured teams in the league. How do you get that right? What tweaks can you make to improve that? So that to me really stands out as an example that they're leaving no stone unturned. They're going to evaluate every aspect of coaching, personnel, support staff to make sure that the best possible resources are here for this team in 2023. And that's a big deal, I think, that they're willing to go to that level of detail, of commitment. And listen, Sydney, Greg Penner, he realizes that this is not good enough. This is not the standard. He apologized directly to the fans. He knows that Broncos country expects more. And you never really know when a new ownership group takes over, what is their approach going to be? Are they going to kind of just let things be? Are they worried about the bottom line? What is going to happen here? It's very clear. And I know I said this earlier, but Greg Penner and the Walton Penner family ownership group, they want to get a winning football team on the field, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen.
Yep. And do it as soon as they possibly can.
Yes.
Yeah. 2 weeks left in the season. A lot of things are changing already, but Aric, appreciate your time and your insight today.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you'll meet me right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for another episode tomorrow. I will see you all then.